My husband was beating on my front door hard enough to rattle the picture frames, shouting that I had ruined his life. 3 days earlier, I had been sitting in a plastic chair outside the pediatric wing at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital in Nashville, holding my phone with both hands so I wouldn't drop it. My daughter Emma was 2 years old, curled up under a thin hospital blanket with an IV taped to her little hand. A nurse named Patrice had just told me the words no mother ever wants to hear. "We need to move quickly, Mrs. Bennett." I was 46 years old, an Army logistics officer out of Fort Campbell, and I had spent half my adult life solving problems with bad roads, late shipments, and missing supplies. But sitting there in that hallway staring at a hospital bill estimate, I felt like a scared young woman with no rank, no plan, and no air in my lungs. The amount I needed right away was $5,500. Not $55,000, not some impossible movie number. Just enough to make you think surely somebody who loves us will help. So I called my husband Mark. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding annoyed. "Rebecca, I'm in the middle of something." "Emma needs surgery," I said. "They need the payment today. It's $5,500. There was a pause, but not the kind I needed. No fear, no panic, no I'm on my way. Then he said, "We just closed on the beach house." I blinked at the beige hospital wall. "What?" "The Destin place. Every dollar's tied up right now. Our daughter is in a hospital bed." He lowered his voice like I was embarrassing him in public. "You'll have to figure it out yourself." Before I could answer, I heard his mother in the background. Linda had that sharp church lady voice that could cut fabric. Then she cut in. "Stop calling my son," she said. "Go ask the Army." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended. Across the hall, a vending machine hummed. Somewhere nearby, a baby cried, and a doctor laughed softly at something a nurse said, like normal life had the nerve to keep going. I didn't cry right away. I folded the estimate in half, then in half again until the paper was small enough to fit in my palm. That evening around 7:40, Mark's father, Harold Bennett, came walking down the hallway in khakis and an old Vanderbilt ball cap. He looked smaller than I remembered. He didn't ask where Mark was. He didn't defend Linda. He just sat beside me, reached into his jacket pocket, and slipped a plain white envelope into my hand. "Take this," he said. "Harold, I can't." "Yes, you can." His eyes were wet, but his voice stayed steady. Then he leaned close and whispered, "Don't open the letter inside until you're home." That was when I realized the envelope wasn't just help. It was a warning. I didn't open Harold's envelope that night. I couldn't. Emma had finally fallen asleep after hours of tests, blood draws, and doctors coming in and out of her room. The monitors beside her bed beeped in a slow, steady rhythm that somehow made the silence feel even heavier. I sat in the recliner by the window holding that plain white envelope in my lap. For the first time in 22 years of marriage, I realized I was afraid of what the truth might look like. Outside, the Nashville skyline glowed beyond the parking garage. My Army duffel bag sat unopened in the corner. I had left Fort Campbell so quickly that morning, I hadn't even unpacked my uniform before rushing Emma to Vanderbilt. Around midnight, I finally broke the seal. The first thing I saw was a cashier's check. $5,500. Exactly what the hospital needed. I stared at it until the numbers blurred. Then I unfolded Harold's handwritten letter. His handwriting looked shaky. "Rebecca, please don't argue with me about this money. Emma needs it now." I wish I had spoken sooner. I kept hoping Mark would come to his senses. He didn't. "He's been lying to you much longer than you realize." That was it. No long explanation. Just one sentence that made my stomach drop. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back inside. The next morning, I walked downstairs to the billing office and handed over the cashier's check. The woman behind the counter smiled. "You're all set, Mrs. Carter." Hearing those 4 words nearly brought me to tears. Emma's surgery could finally move forward. When I returned upstairs, Harold was waiting outside the room with 2 cups of coffee from the hospital cafe. "I figured yours would be cold by now," he said. He knew me too well. We sat together in the hallway while Emma slept. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest all night. "Why did you write that letter?" Harold stared down into his coffee. "Because I should have told you years ago." I didn't interrupt. "When you and Mark got married," he said quietly, "I thought he'd grow into the kind of man you deserved." He gave a sad little laugh. I kept waiting. "That hurt more than I expected," Harold continued. "You were deployed. You missed birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas mornings, but every time you came home, you acted like you were the lucky one." I smiled faintly. "I was." "No." he said, looking straight at me. You were carrying everyone. His words brought back memories I'd spent years pushing aside. I remembered mailing deployment checks home from Kuwait, picking up extra assignments because the tax-free pay helped cover Mark's struggling roofing business, living in military housing while Mark built his company one customer at a time. When Emma was born, I turned down a promotion because another assignment would have moved us across the country. Mark had hugged me that night. I'll never forget what you're giving up for us. Apparently he already had. As his business grew, little things began changing. He stopped asking about my day. He rolled his eyes whenever I mentioned another training exercise. Linda never missed a chance to remind me what she thought. A child needs her mother, she'd say over Thanksgiving dinner. Not another medal. I usually smiled and changed the subject. It seemed easier. Now, sitting beside Harold in a hospital hallway, I wondered how many little compromises had quietly become one enormous mistake. Harold reached into his pocket and handed me a folded receipt. I withdrew most of my retirement savings yesterday. I looked at him, stunned. You used your retirement... He nodded. For Emma. I'll pay you back. He smiled gently. I know you would. Before I could say anything else, he rested a hand on my shoulder. Rebecca! His voice dropped almost to a whisper. The beach house? He hesitated. It isn't just in Mark's name by accident. I felt my heartbeat quicken. There are things you don't know. I didn't answer Harold right away. The hallway suddenly felt colder even though it was late July. What do you mean? I finally asked. He looked down the corridor before speaking, almost like he wanted to make sure no one was listening. The beach house wasn't supposed to be only Mark's. I frowned. I don't understand. You were. For a second I thought I'd misheard him. Harold took a slow sip of his coffee. About 6 weeks ago, Mark asked me to look over some closing documents. You know I've always handled paperwork better than he has. I nodded. He left them on the dining room table while he took a phone call. Harold's face tightened. I wasn't snooping. I was checking the numbers like he asked. He reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded a small piece of paper. I copied this before I left. It was the property address in Destin, Florida. Below it was a handwritten note. Owner Mark Bennett. Nothing else. No joint ownership, I asked. He slowly shook his head. Not even your name anywhere. I stared at the paper. But we've always bought everything together. I know. My military income helped qualify for the loan. I know. I've been making deposits into our savings for years. I know. Every answer sounded like another brick falling on my chest. Harold sighed. I asked Mark why your name wasn't included. What did he say? He told me. Harold hesitated. He said military marriages don't always last. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes the truth is so ugly your mind refuses to believe it. That's ridiculous. I hoped it was. He looked at me with genuine regret. But then Linda walked into the kitchen. I already knew this wasn't going to end well. She said it was smart planning. I closed my eyes. Harold continued quietly. She said if anything happened between the two of you, at least the beach house would stay in the family. I opened my eyes again. So I wasn't family anymore. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Just then my phone buzzed. For one hopeful second, I thought it might be Mark asking about Emma. Instead, it was a notification from Facebook. Linda had posted new pictures. She and Mark were standing on a white sand beach, smiling in front of a 2-story house with blue shutters. The caption read, "Dreams really do come true. Family first." I stared at those 2 words. Family first. Emma was lying upstairs connected to monitors. Mark hadn't even asked how the surgery was scheduled. I quietly locked my phone and slipped it into my purse. Harold noticed. Was that Linda? I nodded. He didn't ask to see the pictures. He already knew. After a long silence, he spoke again. I argued with both of them. You did. They told me I was overreacting. He gave a tired smile. At my age, you stop worrying about sounding dramatic. You just say what's right. I reached over and squeezed his hand. Thank you. He looked embarrassed. I should have done more. No, I shook my head. You came. That afternoon, the pediatric cardiologist stopped by Emma's room. Her surgery was scheduled for 7 o'clock the next morning. There were risks. No guarantees. Just hope. That night I barely slept. Every few minutes I checked Emma's breathing. Around 4 in the morning I found myself staring at the ceiling thinking about the beach house. Part of me wanted to call Mark and demand an explanation. Another part of me knew it wouldn't change anything before Emma's surgery. My daughter needed all of me. The truth about my marriage could wait one more day. Or at least I thought it could. At 6:15 the next morning, just as the nurses began preparing Emma for surgery, my phone lit up again. This time it wasn't Mark. It was my bank. Fraud alert, unusual account activity detected. My heart sank. Something else was terribly wrong. By 7 o'clock that morning, Emma was lying on a narrow hospital bed, wearing a tiny blue gown with cartoon elephants printed on it. She looked so small that the blanket seemed oversized. A nurse with silver hair smiled as she adjusted Emma's stuffed bunny beside her. "We'll take good care of your little girl." I wanted to believe her. When they wheeled Emma toward the operating room, she reached one sleepy hand toward me. "Mommy." "I'm right here, sweetheart." I kissed her forehead. "I'll be waiting when you wake up." Those were the hardest words I'd ever said because I couldn't promise they were true. The doors closed, and suddenly there was nothing left to do but wait. Harold stayed with me. He didn't try to fill the silence with advice or empty reassurance. Instead, he walked to the cafeteria and came back with 2 breakfast sandwiches neither of us touched. Around 9 o'clock, my younger sister Claire drove up from Clarksville after taking the morning off from teaching 2nd grade. She wrapped me in the kind of hug only a sister can give. "You look exhausted." "I feel worse." She sat beside me for nearly 2 hours. We talked about everything except surgery. Emma's favorite Disney movies. The tomatoes growing in Dad's old garden. The stray cat that kept showing up on my front porch. Anything that reminded me normal life still existed. Just after 11, my phone buzzed. For one impossible second, I hoped it was Mark. It wasn't.